Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. So, I'll cut the gist of this video very short and try to summarize it, and then I'm gonna go try and dive into the details. This is the second time I'm recording it, but I kind of didn't feel satisfied with the first video. Basically, I think Kabam is currently in the middle of taking a massive swing and putting in a ton of resources into that. But simultaneously, I do feel like they're making a fairly huge mistake. Let me explain. Before I start explaining, I will want to draw parallels with Relics. Because I think Relics was also a fairly comparable situation where Kabam was absolutely taking a massive swing with the Relics. Because it was like a massive undertaking and they absolutely overcomplicated it. But perhaps most importantly, they kind of went all in with the Relics in hopes that they can monetize it to the max, right? There was absolutely no reason for Relics to be as over-designed and complex as they are in this game, given the majority of them barely make an impact. Half the Relics are not, relevant with any of the quote-unquote good meta champions, and it turns out that people didn't want to spend money on them, right? Or not to the same degree. Because there was absolutely no need for Relics to have their own catalysts, or ranks, or star levels, even, There was absolutely no definitive need for them to have the ISO and awakened abilities and signature abilities and all that stuff. Kabam effectively kind of copied the concept of champion, made it into a form of a relic / striker, and hoped that, it's going to generate them a ton of revenue because they immediately started selling crystals, they immediately started putting them in offers and all that stuff. And players just were not willing to spend on it too much because they either didn't see the point, or they didn't quite fully grasp it, or it just didn't resonate. And that caused Relics to get completely shelved for several years because Kabam was just quite frankly not able to justify the development time and the resources required to create these relics versus the revenue that they brought in. Because make no mistake, if relics were selling a ton, Kabam would have never stopped making them. But Kabam did stop making them because people weren't spending money on them. So ultimately, this entire relic system was deemed to be a fail. Then they, came up with the new version of it, they reworked it, and they made it much, much more simpler for them to create it, and they used existing infrastructure to try and monetize them again with new crystals, utilizing the same ISO and everything else. But point being is, Relic 1.0 project failed miserably. Relic 2.0 project, I don't know whether it's failing, whether it's worthwhile for them, whether it isn't, but one thing's for sure, they invested a lot less resources into this entire system. This is like dumbed down, massively simplified version of Relics when it comes to their own design that's using already kind of like the system that was over-designed in my opinion. But Relics failed. Kabam took a massive gamble and player base didn't respond to it. I think Kabam is taking a massive swing right now with the champion design as well. And I base that, number one, from the language that Kabam and devs are using recently, especially when people are not super enthusiastic about some of the released champions, if they are kind of like ramp-up style champions. We have gotten fairly defensive and aggressive comments from Kabam employees saying that, Battlegrounds isn't everything, and not every champion has to be good for Battlegrounds, which is absolutely true, by the way. Kabam can release any champion that they want, but at no point players are kind of like mandated to love them, to chase them, to rank them, and to spend money on them. So if Kabam wants, they can make 15 Groots in a row and watch their game die. You know what I mean? That's how I always look at things, whether that be about movies and MCU. Like, they can make whatever movies they like, because I'm not obligated to watch them. Those movies have to earn my attention and my kind of like goodwill to spend money on them, to go to the cinema and to pay Disney for that movie. If they release a bunch of bad movies in a row, I'm not gonna go and watch them. Basically regardless of what I hear. If they start releasing good movies, I'm gonna go and watch them. If I see a trailer and I think it looks absolutely amazing, I'm gonna go and watch it. If I see a trailer and it looks crap, I won't. And likewise, like if it gets good reviews, so on and so forth. So it's all about incentives. It's up to, Disney to convince me that I should pay for that movie and I should go and watch it. Likewise, it's up to Kabam to convince the players that this champion is good and that we should chase it and we should rank it. And they can design whatever they want, but we are not obligated to go and chase that champion and, rank it and say that it's good. That's the way I view it. And that has happened a lot recently. Too much that it can't be a coincidence anymore. If you take a look at it, Blue Marvel is a ramp-up style champion. Heimdall is a ramp-up style champion. Stellar's Forge Star-Lord is a ramp-up style champion. And J. Jonah Jameson is also a ramp-up style champion. So that would be 4 out of the 5 champions released / buffed over the last couple of months are all ramp-ups, right? And generally speaking, they're not very popular in the game unless they're like exceptional defenders. Like enchanters or something like that. But unless they're like massive defenders, those champions will not be popular. As we can see, Blue Marvel, like Stellar Star-Lord, they have like 0 defensive value or very little defensive value. So it almost seems like, according to the current view of a ton of players in the game, Blue Marvel and Stellar Star-Lord kind of designed to fail, designed not to be chased and loved, unless Kabam is obviously trying to pivot from shorter fights into the Coliseum, into the, let's say Coliseum / Necropolis style content. We'll see what else they kind of release that is in longer format, but I do think there's something else coming. At the same time, I think Kabam is unnecessarily putting all their chips in this basket again. And I'm going to explain why. So if you take a look at these champions, Blue Marvel, Heimdall, Stellar Star-Lord, and J. Jonah Jameson, all of them are ramp-ups, but unlike many of the champions that Kabam released over the last year or two, they do not get any extra mechanics specifically for battlegrounds. Because last year, Kabam obviously put battlegrounds as one of the main focus of the champion release. And that was visible in champions like Spider-Woman, like Caroline Dean, Nico. They're like basically designed to be like dominant battleground champions. And even the champions that were not necessarily as dominant, in many cases, have additional abilities specifically for battlegrounds. As a good example here is gonna be, where's that ugly bastard? Coliseum in battlegrounds is starting with a couple of charges. Then, because otherwise he's a ramp-up champion and he likely wouldn't be popular. Only reason they added him those 2 battleground charges is so he would be popular, similar to somebody like, Spider-Punk. Now, they might not have necessarily been able to achieve the popularity, but he does have the ability when he starts a fight in battlegrounds, Spider-Punk gathers crowd while he goes as defender or while fighting in battlegrounds, or duels start with 100. He starts with a half of a ramp. And it's not just them, it's, quite few champions. And on a quick, check of my own memory, obviously we do have somebody like Shatter that does that as well. And I'm sure there are more. I am absolutely convinced that these are not the only ones. But basically, yeah. And in battleground, she starts with 2 of her charges, each charge increasing her attack, and thus making her like viable enough for battlegrounds. Right? So that is the thing that they used to do for the champions that they realized are kind of ramp up style in order to make them more appealing to the most of the majority of the player base, and in order to be able to sell them better. They have completely abandoned all of that, right? They could have easily allowed Heimdall to start with X amount of buffs in battlegrounds, for instance. They chose not to do that. They could have easily allowed this guy to start with X amount of, charges or something in battlegrounds. They didn't do that. They could have easily allowed Stellar Star-Lord gain X amount of combo at the beginning of the fight, and they or J. Jonah Jameson could have had X amount of armor ups at the start of battlegrounds fight, just like for instance Shatra. But again, in all of these instances, they chose to forgo that. To me, that's dumb. Like, don't get me wrong, because in every single one of these cases, it would have only made these champions popular and more desirable by the players. They actively chose not to do that. That, to me, tells me that they are going kind of like all in into these like ramp up longer former champions. But again, keep in mind, if they had the good common sense, they could have had both. All of these ramp up champions could have kind of like been tuned and good enough for battlegrounds in terms of damage. And that would only have taken like a couple of lines of text, one extra ability for each of these champions. They would potentially be viable for those game modes. Especially somebody like Blue Marvel, J. John Jameson, or Heimdall, because Blue Marvel seems to be versatile enough. Heimdall and J. John Jameson seems to have some defensive value. But they didn't. And they didn't, again, because I think they're kind of like taking a pivot to what they're focusing on in the game quite drastically. And I do fully expect quite a few more ramp-up champions to be released this year. In fact, Summoner Choice winner was written up as ramp-up champion, AOA Colossus. He had specific lines of his armor gets harder as he battles on, and the more battles he has, or something like that. So that to me sounds like a ramp-up champion there as well, off top of my head. But I'm sure that some of the upcoming ones are also going to be ramp-up ones. Oh, Doctor Strange is also kind of a ramp-up champion, by the way, within the fight, of course, but still. Forgot to mention that. So that'll be 5 out of 6. Anyways, here we are. And here is the picture that kind of inspired this entire video, and here is the picture of why I think Kabam's plan will fail. And again, they could have avoided this by adding an extra line or two in each of these champion kits. But this was the reason why I realized their long ramp-up plan is probably going to fail anyways. So what do we see here? We see a game mode such as Coliseum. Just about every champion that is there is the champion that we have ranked up for Battlegrounds or Alliance for. And that is going to carry on to be the trend. And there are a couple of reasons for it. But number one, that's going to be the mentality of the player base. Because we do not see this game mode as kind of important enough. Again, my alliance is fairly big. They do care about prestige, they do care about war, and they do care about battleground. So that's what they rank up for. So I'm sure that, in your alliance, these might look a little bit different. But here we can see that without having any discussion in between themselves, everybody just decided to do the best they can with whatever champions they already have ranked up. I don't think a single champion got kind of like ranked up for Coliseum from any of these players, and I don't think that's going to change. I think what the player habit here is going to be is that they're gonna rank up champions again that are quick, fast, long form, good damage dealers in short to medium fights or defenders, and then just use whatever they have for stuff like Coliseum. I don't think, for instance, anybody is ranking up J. John Jameson for a Coliseum fight. I don't think anybody is going to be ranking up. They might be ranking up those champions for prestige, an entirely different point, right? Which is part of the reason why probably Kabam's giving them good prestige. But that would be the only way. If you rank up a champion for prestige and it happens to be good for this, which kind of fits in line with Silver Surfer. But let's say if the prestige is not a factor, or if the champion that's ramp up doesn't have good prestige, you're not gonna rank up for this. You're just gonna use whatever you have. Like, at no point I was considering to rank up Gore to rank 4 because he fit all the tags and he should be good for this fight, right? And the same thing would be for the new champions. Players are just going to use whatever they already have. Unless, obviously, there is major incentive to do otherwise. But Kabam has failed to incentivize the players to even care about this game mode to that degree. Because, for instance, here, they have made it grindy, right? They have made it grindy. And there are no worthwhile alliance rank rewards. This is like a regular AQ reward. if there was like massive amount of rewards, rank rewards, maybe players would rank. But in this case, I don't think many people would rank for Alliance Coliseum, even if these rewards were amazing, because there is no incentive for any player to go for like 20 bars. You have incentive to unlock podium levels and grind out higher podium level to the point where the individual bars don't really matter. Similarly to Alliance Coliseum, we're gonna have these Alliance Coliseum fights going on in perpetuity probably, but there's no reason to rank up a champion that could potentially do the most bars. For instance, let's assume Northstar can do the most bars here possible. Why would I rank up a champion and care to rank up Northstar for this? I don't get any single extra catalyst or crystal shard for clearing 25 bars or clearing 26 bars. In other words, again, the only difference from me being able to do 15 bars or 20 bars is the fact that I can save 25 energy. That's it. So Kabam has failed to give players the incentive to actually rank up champions. And in past, we also have examples of similar things. Like, we have arena challenges, right? And we had to do the Necropolis runs. We had, for example, a mutant Necropolis run. And that is content geared perfectly toward champions like Northstar or Strife, potentially. But vast majority of the people who did these arena challenges in Necropolis just used Onslaught and Mr. Sinister because they had them ranked up anyways. And the same thing is gonna happen every time, basically, or almost every time. Because on one hand, you can rank up champion that is good for specifically something. On the other hand, you can rank up champion that's good for most things. Which one you can pick? Or even if you have to choose in between ranking up a champion for this one specific thing that you can do once a month or maybe once ever, like Necropolis or like, Alliance Coliseum, or you can choose to rank up a champion for something that you play daily or frequently. Which one is more important? So unless Kabam is planning for us to kind of like have Coliseum fights every day, basically, and have a ton of rewards associated with it, people will not largely choose to rank up champions specifically for that one thing. There you go. And therefore, that is what I think. I think Kabam is currently making a massive push and a swing towards longer form pieces of content and towards long form champions. And I think they are making a massive mistake with that. I think people will be underwhelmed with these champions. I don't think many people will be super hyped to open crystals for them or chase them or rank them or be like hyper enthusiastic to acquire them. And what is the stupidest thing, in my opinion, is that Kabam could avoid all that by just adding them like extra ramp ups for battlegrounds or this and that and that and that. It wouldn't have taken much. But they clearly have chosen not to do that like they used to with Shatra, with Spider-Punk, with Carl. So there you go. Let me know what you think about my theory. I'll catch you guys soon. Bye-bye. Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about the next